Hello guys, good morning everybody. Welcome to our YouTube channel. If I am audible, just let me know. Audible. Okay. Okay. Give me just 1 minute. I think the screen has hanged, right? Let the screen come, right? So it is hanged a little bit. Right? I think I need to turn it off and then start it back. Let's see if it works, right? We hope it's work. I hope everybody is fine, right? So we're going to discuss and start our editorial analysis and the newspaper analysis soon, but let's wait for the screen to come up, right? Winter are hard on electronics. Might be. I think it's a technical problem in the screen that has resulted in this. Okay. Anything you have a doubt related to before I start the session, you can ask me any doubt if you want to ask any doubt. We can take the doubts as well, right? हम पहले उल्टा करते हैं, right? We take the doubts afterwards, but today, because let's hope our screen starts, then we will be taking our class. Before that, you can ask me any doubt if you want to ask any doubt. अच्छा, एक बात बताओ, जितने भी हमारे साथ हैं, ये मैं बार बार इसलिए पूछ लेता हूँ ताकि मुझे आइडिया आ जाए कि कितने प्रीलिम्स दे रहे हैं इस बार. अभी 24 बच्चे लाइव है मेरे साथ. हाउ मेनी आर गिविंग द प्रीलिम्स दिस ईयर? दिस ईयर मतलब 2024. खुल के बताओ यार. हाँ जी. कितने स्टूडेंट्स दे रहे हैं? So we have around 6 to 7 students, right? Okay. So let's start the analysis for today. I think it has again hanged, right? So shall we do one thing if you all agree? I know the important news that are there, right? The editorials that I have to discuss and the important things that have come. I think because the screen is hanging, can we do it orally? If it is okay with you guys. So I will try to make you refer to the article that we are discussing and then we can discuss, right? Because I think screen is not working right now. And I don't want that the session to end like this, right? Because of technical failure, we need to do something. So what we can do is, we can discuss the editorials and we can discuss the things orally, right? So you can listen to me, right? Okay. So there was one news that was there on the main page, the first page, that is the front page, that was related to PM Jan Man scheme. Now, this scheme was announced by our Prime Minister in November. it was related to how we can integrate tribal people into the Indian society and Indian framework. Now, this aspect is very important considering how much the tribal people have been, let's say, isolated from the rest of the population, and it is very important and imperative that they are integrated into the mainstream society. So, as a result, there were certain indicators on which basis this scheme was launched, and in continuation of that list and the continuation of that scheme, government is now carrying out the recent survey in this particular hamlets of their PVTG groups. Now, PVTG groups are very important. These are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, right? These are the vulnerability की अगर बात करते हैं tribal groups में, then they come to be the, let's say, most vulnerable among tribal groups. And there are how many tribes we have under PVTG right now? We have 75 tribes under particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and the maximum number of PVTG tribes are in Odisha. But the problem that we are just facing right now is we do not have enough data and census related to the population and their habitations. As a result, in order to make sure that we have proper caste data, in order to have proper what we say related to Aadhaar data, so there has been a complete census that would be undertaken in the context of PM Janman scheme. Now, one thing you have to understand is when we talk about tribal people, there are certain aspects like when before British came, these tribal people would be the owners of the forest. They used to live in the forest and they were the owners of the forest. They had no restriction over the forest produce, right? They used to practice shifting agriculture, and they used to be somehow what we call it as the owner of the forest. But what happened after what we say is after the British came, or the advent of the British, colonization started, their relationship with forest changed. I am talking about the relationship of the tribal with the forest. Their relationship took a complete overhaul. How it took a complete overhaul? Because it was of the policies of the British. There was one article that we had discussed related to this, I think few days back, that was with the advent of the British came the Indian Forest Act of 1878 that somehow gave the authority and the control and the ownership to the British government. As a result, the tribal in these areas were once the owners, now were reduced to the status of bonded laborers. As a result, they were alienated from the forest, they were alienated from the resources of the forest, they did not have now the ownership of the forest resources. As a result, they somehow got isolated even from the forest जहां पे उनका main dependence थी. As a result, you saw in your modern history a lot of various peasant and tribal uprisings. But after that, government undertook what we say a note of that, and what they said that we're going to change certain laws. So they brought in Forest Conservation Act, but that wasn't helping the tribals to get their control over the ownership of the resources. And the main dent in that thing was being made by Forest Rights Act that was in favor of tribals, that gave them certain ownership rights which were very important. Implementation thing is different when we talk about Forest Rights Act, but yes, Forest Rights Act 2006 has been very instrumental in ascertaining the claims of the tribal people, even in the scenarios when a particular forest area has to be reserved for a national park or a wildlife sanctuary. Their rights and their claims are the most important ones that have to be settled, otherwise it becomes what we can say abrogation of their rights that have been granted them under Forest Rights Act of 2006. So this is the point that we have to understand, and this is the scheme that you need to note take as well, that it is related to PM Janman scheme and it is very important, right? So ये आपको एक डेटा पता होना चाहिए, PVTG ट्राइब्स के बारे में पता होना चाहिए, सबसे ज्यादा ट्राइब्स कहाँ पे हैं और मैक्सिमम नंबर कहाँ पे है, and these are the certain areas that you have to undertook a note of it. I hope this point is clear to everybody, right? हाँ जी, कोई डाउट है तो पूछ सकते हो. देखो, अब आप ऐसा वर्ड यूज नहीं कर सकते हो. नाउ वी सी द सेम टाइप ऑफ व्हाट वी से colonization in the name of globalization, है ना. See, government has been trying its every bit so that they can integrate mainstream, integrate tribal people into the mainstream society. They have started a lot of initiatives. A lot of affirmative action is being done for PVTG groups, for ST groups as well, right? So there has to be a particular streamlined procedure for that. If the streamlined procedure works very well, then only we would be able to see for future developments in context of scheduled tribes. I hope this point is clear to everybody, right? Okay. So this was the one editorial article that was there on the front page. The next important thing that was in today's newspaper, right? एक दो चीजें ज्यादा important नहीं थी. एक था कि हमारा climate change को लेके, right? So COP is again in news. That is what we call it as conference of parties. Now when I call about conference of parties, now there are certain main areas on which discussions are being held. Now what are those areas on which discussions are being held? Those are mitigation, adaptation, finance, loss and damage, and global stocktake, right? So these are the key areas on which what we call it as the debate is being held under conference of parties. Now let's try to understand the whole scenario. When I talk about mitigation, yes, countries have been able to negotiate something on the context of mitigation. Mitigation is a word that is being used for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Now in this context, one has to understand that there has been a face-off between developed countries and developing countries. Developed countries have been in the favor that we need to phase out all the fossil fuels, be it coal, oil and natural gas. But developing countries have been saying that we are too much reliant on coal and we cannot just buy easily just phase out coal. We need certain time. We can what do maximum is we can reduce the consumption of coal. But there has been standoff between the developed countries and developing countries related to this matter, phase out of fossil fuels. So as a result, what has happened is that is from COP26 that started from Glasgow, COP27 that happened at Sharm el Sheikh, and COP28 that is happened at Dubai. The one thing that has been taken away from this COP28 conference is now the text and the draft says transition away from fossil fuels. Very important. What the text says, transition away from fossil fuels in a just and a phased manner, that is by 2050. So it has, let's say, accommodated both the things of developed countries as well as developing countries as well. So this is the thing that has been discussed in mitigation part, right? Now when I talk about finance, now one thing you must be noticed, you must have noticed that it was in Paris Agreement that it was stated that $100 billion would be financed from developed countries to developing countries from 2021 till 2025. This has been their motto that we have to उसके अंदर आउटकम भी था एग्रीमेंट के अंदर कि $100 billion has to be financed from developed countries to developing countries. But sadly what we have seen is from 2021 there hasn't been that much promise that has been kept, that was of $100 billion, but the developed countries were of the opinion that by 2023 we would be able to mobilize $100 billion. So this year in COP28 there were discussions whether you have been able to mobilize this $100 billion or not. So as a result, what came to the conclusion was still the amount has not been fulfilled yet. A new collective quantified goal was looked at beyond 2025, that what shall be the climate finance beyond 2025, because the figure that has been given in this context is $100 billion from 2021 to 2025. Now beyond 2025, what shall be the amount? It will be decided in the new collective quantified goal, and it would have the starting from base price from $100 billion, and it can go up to any amount that would be decided before, let's say 2025, right? So this is the aspect we have to understand, that finance को लेके अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं, अभी भी जो प्रॉमिस किया गया था फुलफिल नहीं किया गया है, बट नाउ द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज आर ऑफ द ओपिनियन दैट वी मनी रिक्वायर मनी इन एक्सेस ऑफ ट्रिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स. हमें ट्रिलियन ऑफ डॉलर चाहिए तभी हम कुछ फाइट कर पाएंगे क्लाइमेट चेंज को लेकर. सो इन द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ मिटिगेशन यू हैव ट्रांजिशन अवे फ्रॉम फॉसिल फ्यूल्स. इन द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस, नाउ द न्यू कलेक्टिव क्वांटिफाइड गोल इज टू बी सेट अप. The third thing is related to what we call as loss and damage fund. Now when I talk about loss and damage fund, this was operationalized this year, finalized last year, and now $700 million has been raised in this, what we call it as the loss and damage fund. Now what particularly is loss and damage fund? It is the damage that is being caused to the vulnerable countries because of the actions of developed countries in the past that have created a lot of loss and damage. As a result, that countries needs to be compensated, and they would be compensated under loss and damage fund. But one of the thing you have to understand is कि अभी इन्होंने $700 million raise किया है, but जबकि overall if we see the demand that has been coming from the vulnerable countries, it is up to $280 billion. So they are quite short of the mark that is required in order to meet the objectives and requirements of the loss and damage fund. So this is the point that you have to understand, that loss and damage fund was operationalized from this year, that was from COP28, right? So three things we have discussed. One was related to mitigation, one was related to loss and damage fund, and third one was related to climate finance, right? Okay. Now the next thing that is important is related to, see, I have to go forward and see the comments, right? क्योंकि यहाँ से बड़ी दूर है comments. Okay. The fourth thing was related to global stock take. Global stock take is one of the important things that has happened this year, where it has reiterated the reports of IPCC AR6 synthesis report, where they have said that the countries are too much far behind in achieving the goals of Paris Agreement. They are not doing enough in order to reduce the global gas emissions, and if they want to do that, they would have to do it right now, and they have to increase the number of levels in which they are reducing the emissions. For somehow they are trying to say that you have to reduce 60% emissions by 2035 as compared to 2019 levels. If you are able to do that, you would be able to keep the Paris Agreement intact, that is to achieve the limiting the global temperatures within 1.5 degree and 2 degree. That is only going to happen if you are able to limit the emissions, and that to 60% by 2035 as compared to 2019 levels. So this was the thing that was reiterated in global stocktake as well. So this was the fourth thing. Now comes the fifth thing that is very important to understand, that is adaptation. Now this is the article that has been given. Thank you, Vaibhav, you have mentioned it as well. That is global goal on adaptation. Now coming from COP26, COP27 and COP28, one of the saddest part that has come out from this COP Conference of Parties, which is the highest decision making body of UNF Framework Convention on Climate Change, it is there hasn't been any global goal on adaptation. It hasn't been agreed by any of the countries. There is lot of adaptation finance gaps. There is not enough money that is coming for adaptation, and when we talk about adaptation, money required for adaptation is very important, because that is the money that is going to be used by the vulnerable, by the developing, by the least developed countries, in order to make sure that they are able to finance certain structures, certain technology, certain capacity building, so that they are able to fight the impacts of the climate change. So always adaptation is related to face the impacts of the climate change, which is very important, and somehow we have seen that there hasn't been anything concrete that has come related to global goal on adaptation. There has not been much things that we can say about it कि proper तरीके से इसको लेके कभी भी कुछ चीज आई नहीं है global goal को लेके, और इसके finance को लेके भी कोई proper parameter decide नहीं हुए हैं. But yes, this year there was one little change where the countries were said that you prepare your own adaptation plans and submit it to us. So this was the new thing that had happened in case of adaptation, where the countries were said कि यार आप अपना खुद से adaptation plan बनाइए और उसको क्या करिए, submit कीजिए. So these have been the 5 things that has been discussed when I talk about COP28. But now these are the main agreements that have been discussed. There are certain agreements where we do not have a consensus, right? And these are called the parallel process. Like yesterday we had the global what we say declaration on climate and health, where India is not a member. Yesterday we were discussing how climate change has been a contributor to health crisis, right? So this was this declaration that India has not been part of. Then there is this global methane pledge that which India has not been part of, and it was signed at COP26, and this year we have seen a lot of more countries that are joining this global methane pledge. Now if we talk about forest climate leadership partnership, India has not been part of forest climate leadership partnership, and this partnership was mobilized from 2022, that is at COP27 Sharm el Sheikh, where countries decided that they're gonna reverse and halt deforestation by 2030. तो ग्लोबल मीथेन प्लेज की बात ले लीजिए, फॉरेस्ट क्लाइमेट लीडरशिप पार्टनरशिप की बात ले लीजिए, डेक्लेरेशन ऑन क्लाइमेट एंड हेल्थ की बात ले लीजिए. देन अगेन देयर वाज डेक्लेरेशन ऑन ट्रिपलिंग द रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी कैपेसिटी, डबलिंग द एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी by 2030. India is also not a part of these declaration. So you can get a direct question in prelims, which of the following agreements India are a part of and which of the following agreements India are not part of. India is not a part of global methane pledge. India is not a part of FCLP, forest climate leadership partnership. India is not a part of declaration on climate and health. India is not a part on the declaration to triple the renewable energy capacity and to double the energy efficiency. Yet India has its own, what we call it as, rules and programs and policies that is in there in order to achieve renewable energy. Like we have a certain target that we want to have a 500 gigawatt of renewable energy. वो target तो है हमारे पास, but अगर हम यहाँ पे बात करें under these global conferences and policies, we are not part of these policies. Now there were certain important things that also happened apart from these at COP28, like there was this discussion that there needs to be urban smart plans, right? CHAMP initiative की बात करी गई थी. Then there was a certain initiative that was being discussed, that was very, very important. That was related to have a sustainable agriculture and integration of food system into your INDCs. What are INDCs? These are the intended nationally determined contributions which are very, very important for achieving the goals of Paris Agreement. And countries have been asked this year in the global stock take that happened that you have to revise your INDCs and you have to present it before us. I hope this point is clear to everybody and everybody is aware of this situation, what we call it as global goal on adaptation. हाँ जी, यहां तक किसी को कोई डाउट है? ठीक है, मैंने बहुत डिटेल में बता दिया आपको. अगर मेरे पास आज ये चल रहा होता ब्लैक बोर्ड हमारा, है ना, तो मैं और डिटेल में आपको इसमें लिखवा देता, एक चार्ट बना देता. But I had taken a class in YouTube as well, on YouTube, related to COP28. So I have mentioned all these points, and there were certain other points as well. एक investment fund बनाया गया था UAE के through, right? अबू धाबी के थ्रू अस्त्रा करके शायद था, वो भी चीज आप नोट कर सकते हो. These are the things that you have to understand in context of COP, right? Now, I don't have a newspaper right now, but one thing I want to tell you that there is now the important article that I'm going to discuss. It is related to economics page, and there are two important things. One is this Indian ASEAN agreement on trade in goods, right? It has to be renewed. Now this is the important part क्योंकि इसको 11-12 साल हो चुके हैं जब ये last बना था. Now it has been, let's say, what we have seen is that is more in favor of ASEAN countries, right? Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So it needs to be rebalanced, refocused, so that we are also able to benefit from it and new things can be included under that agreement on trade and goods in let's say agreement in goods, right? तो वो एक important चीज है जिसको भी रिवाइज करने की बातचीत चल रही है, and we're gonna see it's gonna be revised soon. And one of the important thing we have to understand is that we have a trade deficit with ASEAN countries. Second important thing that came in newspaper in economics page, I'm telling you, was related to stagflation. Now stagflation is a very important terminology that you must have seen in economics. If anyone knows what is stagflation, write in the comment box. हाँ जी, अगर किसी को पता है स्टैगफ्लेशन क्या है, फटाफट कमेंट बॉक्स में लिखिए. थैंक यू वैभव, यू आर मेंशनिंग द नेम ऑफ द कॉलम सेक्शन एज वेल, राइट? हाँ जी, देखो स्टैगफ्लेशन वो सिचुएशन होती है जहां पे पॉलिसी मेकर्स को समझ नहीं आता क्या हो रहा है. बिकॉज ऑन द वन साइड देयर इज इन्फ्लेशन, ऑन द सेकंड साइड देयर इज स्टैग्नेशन. व्हेनेवर वी understand inflation, we say that we have to increase the interest rates. But if you will increase the interest rates, you're going to make it very difficult to create a demand in the economy. If you will not create a demand in the economy because you are trying to contain the inflation, that could have a direct impact on the growth and it can result in stagnation. Now when already there is stagnation, so how do you deal with this situation? That becomes a very important dilemma if I talk about policy makers, that how we going to solve this situation. Because if you will try to solve one problem, other will arise. That is, if you try to solve stagnation, it will impact inflation, and if you will try to impact inflation, then it will lead to stagnation, right? जैसे संभोज करो, अब स्टेग्नेशन है, मार्केट में स्टेग्नेशन है, तो आप ग्रोथ को बढ़ाना चाहते हो, इंटरेस्ट रेट कम करोगे. अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट कम करोगे, मार्केट में डिमांड बढ़ाओगे, तो उससे इन्फ्लेशन हो सकती है. बट ऑलरेडी क्या है, इन्फ्लेशन है. सो हाउ यू गोना सॉल्व दिस सिचुएशन? दैट बिकम्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डिलेमा फॉर पॉलिसी मेकर. एज अ रिजल्ट, दिस इज अ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, एंड कंट्री स्टिल थिंक कि ये सिचुएशन कभी देश के अंदर ना आए. और अभी आरबीआई की रिपोर्ट आई है कि हमारे देश में स्टैगफ्लेशन जैसी सिचुएशन नहीं है. सो दिस कुड बी अ टर्मिनोलॉजी दैट कुड बी आस्क्ड. इफ आई एम नॉट wrong, then this terminology was coined by Ian McLeod, right? You can write it in your notes wherever you want to write that it was given in by Ian McLeod, right? So this was the important thing that comes related to stagflation. I hope that's it for today. Sorry guys, that's it for today, right? So these were the important news that came in today's newspaper. I think we have been able to cover this despite being कि हमारा आज न्यूज़पेपर थोड़ा हैंग हो चुका है, हमारा ब्लैक बोर्ड थोड़ा हैंग हो चुका है, and we have been able to cover the today's class, right? So that's it guys. You have any doubt you can ask me, and that's it for today. कोई और चीज पूछना चाहते हो तो पूछ सकते हो. हाँ जी, राइट. सो देखो एक चीज हमेशा याद रखना, सिचुएशंस कैन बी व्हाट वी कैन से एडवर्स at any moment of time, but you have to fight those adverse situations. And I like the fact that you guys stick to the channel. despite being our screen was not working and you listened it very carefully and very diligently, and I am impressed and I am proud of you guys. So thank you so much. We will see each other tomorrow. Hopefully ये प्रॉब्लम कल फिर नहीं आएगी, राइट? अगर आ भी गई तो फिर भी हम डिस्कशन कर ही लेंगे. थैंक यू सो मच. टेक केयर. बाय बाय एंड एंजॉय योर डे. ओके, ड्रोन अटैक ऑन, क्या लिखा आपने? कीमो प्लूटो. ओके, ड्रोन अटैक होते रहते हैं, देख लेना एक बार. चलिए, थैंक यू सो मच गाइस.